Hi, I'm Jaclyn.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
So here we are again, still social distancing,
Y'all
still,
bored yet? Because I'm bored.
yeah, we're really bored. Courtney and I have FaceTimed a lot the last week.
Yeah, because we're both working from home, and I'm not really a work from home type of person. I've
No.
never really worked from home for long periods of time. Maybe I'll get more used to it. I've only done it for a week, but I'm kind of going crazy. I'm kind of going a little stir crazy.
I've been very blessed to have flexible jobs that allow like the occasional work from home. So like, oh, I'm not feeling well today or I have the plumber coming or, whatever. And so that's nice, but full-time work from home, I can't I'm losing my mind. I'm losing my mind. I just need human interaction very badly. So,
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, it's not. I feel like some days are worse than others. Like some days I'm like,
yeah.
I really enjoy this. Like I just took my 15-minute break and did my laundry. I
Yes.
can get up 5 minutes before I have to clock in. I don't have to put makeup on. I don't have to take a shower, which my hair, I'm on day 6. Day
Yeah,
6 here.
I'm like, I don't
So,
know. I told Courtney I'm going to forget how to put on makeup and how to clasp a bra because I haven't used either of those things in over a week now.
I'm
So,
really wondering if I'm ever going to wear a bra again because like Kevin
yeah.
and I had to go to the grocery store and I just didn't even put a bra on. And I was like, "Oh well, here's my boobs.
You're like we're
You're
we're
welcome."
it's a quarantine. We don't wear bras during quarantines. But we are doing our part to flatten the curve and practice social distancing, and I hope you are as well because the longer no one does it, the longer we all have to do it. So,
And I really don't, please don't make me be here too much longer. Not that I don't love like my cats and Kevin and getting to spend this time, but I'm also like I kind of want to go somewhere that's not my apartment,
yes,
you
and
know?
not the grocery store.
And not the grocery store. I have gone through a few Dunkin' drive-throughs, but they said carry out and takeout's fine. Your girl needs her iced coffee.
Yes, and Andrew and I are trying to, support local businesses with takeout. So, like, we went to a local Indian place the other night, and last night we got cupcakes from a local cupcake place. And, of course, when we go out, there's no one out, which is great. So, I'm really glad that people are actually taking this seriously. But we're also trying to do our part and support our local businesses to make sure that they don't go under because this is going to have catastrophic effects for so many people.
Yeah, it's really rough. And what's the best thing to do? I really don't know. But my thoughts and all the good vibes and my heart goes out to Italy right now because they are struggling. And I know that's super hard and they're super overwhelmed. So hopefully, once things clear up, we can aid them more. We can't do too
Mm-hmm.
much right now because we're all trying to not get the coronavirus, but hopefully, we're able to help them because it is just devastating what's happening.
Yes, and um, just another PSA again, guys. If we don't social distance, we're going to be Italy soon. So just keep that in mind.
And also, on a lighter note, if we are quarantined for a long time, you guys are going to have so many podcast episodes because we are currently practicing social distancing because I live 6.5 hours away from Jaclyn. So we're
Yes.
not recording in the same room. We are,
Yep.
in our separate little rooms. So if this keeps going, we're going to have a lot of time for research and you're going to have a lot of podcast episodes. So
Yes,
no
because
worries.
we don't have a whole lot of other things to do outside of our normal work hours. So, yeah. So today we teased this a couple of weeks ago when we did the I-5 killer. So we are covering Diane Downs.
So, all right. A few sources we have for this episode. We both read The Small Sacrifices by Anne Rule. It's also a movie, and I really want to watch it, and I meant to watch it before this episode, but didn't do it. It stars Farrah Fawcett as Diane Downs.
Yes.
Little fun fact for you guys. Anyway, there is a Heavy.com article, an ABC News article, and there was a 2020 documentary called My Mother's Sins. And so those are a few Most of our research comes from Ann Rule, though.
Yes, but we did double check because she does sometimes change names and stuff like that. So we did do the additional research with the news articles and the 2020 series to make sure that we had all accurate details.
May 19th, 1983, in Springfield, Oregon, a blonde woman pulls up to Mackenzie Williamette Hospital in a red car and is honking her horn. She gets out of the car, and she's not crying, she's not hysterical, she seems very in control, but she's saying, "Someone shot my kids." So the ER staff comes to help her, and she does have 3 kids. There's 2 girls and a boy. They notice that 2 of the children have gunshot wounds to the chest, and the third child is hardly seen. She's on the floor, and she's not moving. The hospital staff hurries the kids into the hospital, and they call the cops to start this investigation. So there are 3 children. There is Christy Ann, Cheryl Lynn, and Stephen Danny. So Christy Ann is 8. They were scared she was dead. She wasn't really breathing. There was some blood in her airway. It is clotting, which is super unusual because if it's like a fresh wound, it's usually not clotting yet. And so they're trying to get a chest tube and give her a blood transfusion, and they finally get her a heartbeat. They do take her into emergency surgery, and she does later have a stroke, and she kind of loses her speech abilities for a while, but they do slowly come back. The second child was Cheryl Lynn. She was 7, and she was dead on arrival. There was no chance of reviving her. And then there was Stephen Danny, and he was 3. He had a gunshot wound just an inch away from his spinal column, and they noticed it was very near contact because there was black powder on his skin. He was crying, he was struggling to breathing, and later he was officially declared that he was paralyzed from the chest down. So the blonde woman who'd pulled up is their mother. Her name's Elizabeth Diane Downs, but she goes by Diane. So she told the night receptionist she was driving down Old Mohawk Road, and she was headed to Marcola, and they were talking, and they were laughing, and just having a good family time, and this man stops in the middle of the road. She stops, and she gets out, and this man's like, "Give me your car." And she's like, "You've got to be kidding me. Like, what?" And so she pretends to throw her keys.
And that's a Diane quote. That's what she tells the police staff, that she said, "You got to be kidding me."
Yeah, I'm not making this up. This is not a reenactment. So she pretends to throw her keys, but he reaches in the window and shoots her children, and then shoots her. She did have like a gunshot wound in her left arm, like around the elbow. So she said she was able to get back in the car and that she drove to the hospital just as fast as she could. And she told the nurse, "It's just a terrible thing to be laughing one minute and then something like this happened to you." So they had called the cops, and an officer shows up. And so now Diane's talking, and she's like, "It's about time you showed up. There's a maniac out there shooting people." Now Diane says that the kids were asleep. So she's already trying to change in her story, but she might be in shock because her children are shot.
Yes.
And she wasn't going to let him have the car. She just bought this car. She was not going to let him have it. I don't know. So the officers are really worried that there's a man out there. They want her, because at the time she just kind of kept saying Mohawk Road. And there was one Mohawk Road that was near the hospital and one that was about 10-ish miles away-ish. Mm-hmm. So they're like, all right, we got to confirm which road.
And like where on the road, because I think it was a pretty like long stretch of rural road, so they wanted to make sure they knew, what area to be looking at.
Yeah, and so she does leave the hospital with her dad and the officer, and she said, "I really hope my car is okay. Is there bullet wounds in it?" But maybe she's just in shock, and so she's like, "I can't think about the fact that my kids might be dying. Let me just think about something else." Because, fun story about me, Kevin had lost his job at one point, and he called me, and I was like, "What? Did you get the Tupperware out of your desk?" I don't know why. That was my first
Sometimes
reaction.
You just focus on those things.
It happens. But, so she shows them the location this happened, and she says she remembers an icky yellow car just before the man stopped her. And then she asked to be taken back to the hospital because her arm's starting to hurt. They tested her hands for gunshot residue, and that's not 100% accurate, but it did come back negative. So police ask, this was pretty late at night. Where were you going? What was happening? So Diane says that she left the house around 9 p.m. to see a friend, Heather, because she knew Heather wanted a horse and she saw an article about a free horse. Heather didn't have a phone, and so she took the clipping to her. Also, from what the book said, usually Diane's parents watched the three kids and they had dinner there and everything before they went home with Diane. This night, her parents did have an obligation, so Diane was with the kids and then took them out. She said they detoured because they wanted to impulsively sightsee. I mean, it's 9 p.m. I don't really know what you're going to see.
Yeah, it's kind of dark outside,
a little bit.
But okay.
The children fell asleep, so she turned down Old Mohawk Road, and then she sees this man waving his hands. She's scared there was an accident. She's trying to help. She said he was white, late 20s, about 5'9", had dark hair, shaggy cut of hair, a little bit of a beard, some Levi's, a Levi jacket, and a dirty off-color t-shirt. So she repeats what happened to the story. She just said the man shot Christy first, and then Danny, and then Cheryl, but she couldn't describe the weapon. So, of course, she's the one that was with the kids, so they're going to try and eliminate her as a suspect first. So they're like, well, do you own any weapons? And she says, yeah, I own a .22 rifle and a .38 pistol. And so she agrees to let them search the car and her home and to look at the guns. So they did notice that Cheryl, her two fatal shots were with a .22 and some .22 bullets. And so they really want to try to find the gun that this happened with. So they search the house and they do find the rifle and some empty bullets. They find a diary and they duplicated it because Diane was like, hey, please bring me my diary. So, of course, when they're like, please bring me my diary, they're like, we're going to make a copy first.
Make sure there's nothing in here that we need to know about, because you already gave us blanket permission to search your house, so.
Yeah, I mean, why not? If nothing else, it might be a good read, So.
I mean, it did prove to be a pretty good read.
Yeah, because she was obsessed with this guy named Robert Knickerbocker. In Anne Roll's book, she calls him Lou Lewiston. So if you're like, where'd you get this name from? This is where. So Robert Knickerbocker. Everyone called him Nick. So in her diary, she's just constantly writing about him, writing about how much she loves him and everything. So she calls him the morning after her kids are saw it, and she's like, how's it going? Are you doing all right? Are you happy? And then she's like, oh, by the way, I got shot and so did my kids.
Yeah, that's the first thing that you typically say when you call someone to tell them that your kids are shot. You're like, oh, how's it going with you? Like, are you doing okay? Are you happy since I'm not there? And, oh, but by the way, somebody shot me and 3 of my kids and one of them's dead. Okay.
Oh, yeah, just like an aside.
Yeah.
Like a by the way.
Oh, yeah. Slipped my mind.
So, all this is seeming a little suspicious. Maybe she's just ditzy. They don't really have any hard evidence against her. Yeah. Some of the investigators were talking about where her gunshot wound was, like, where you would shoot yourself to not hurt yourself, because it's your arm. I mean, not going to do too much damage there, when the other kids were shot, like, in the chest. So the district attorney, Fred Hughey, he visits the hospital and sees Christy and sees Danny. He feels a really strong connection with Christy, and he really feels like he needs to protect her. So he spends a lot of time at the hospital with the kids. He's really trying to find what happened to them. Throughout the whole investigation, he just really is trying to get these kids some justice and make sure they're protected. So they interview Diane's ex-husband and two of the children's fathers, Steve. So Steve says, yeah, Diane owns 3 guns. And they're like, 3? She only mentioned 2. And he's like, yeah, there's, the .22 rifle, the .38, but she also owns a .22 pistol. And
remember that the bullet casings they found in the car were from a .22 pistol, but Diane didn't mention that she had a .22 pistol.
Yeah, and so they're like, okay, well, does Diane know how to use that gun? And Steve's like, oh, yeah, definitely. Like, I taught her how to use that gun. She knows how to fire it. She knows what it's doing. So, Diane's injuries aren't bad. Anything that needs to be done doesn't take a long time. So she wants to come and see Christy. And Christy is, she, has like a chest tube in, like she can't really talk, in a lot of, stress. Her body's under a lot of stress. And so the first time Diane comes in, it's very tense. Like she squeezes her hand and she says, "I love you." But what the nurses notice is that when Diane comes in, all of Christy's vitals, especially her heart rate, jump up really quickly. And they're saying this could be from fear, but the nurses notice like this happens for a long time. Like every time Diane comes in, all of Christy's vitals just spike up. So police are having a few concerns about Diane. Her description's a little weird. How did this, shaggy-haired man, how did he know that she was going to be there? Why did Diane say, "You've got to be kidding me," when this happened? So, and, why didn't he shoot Diane first? If she's out of the car and he wants the car, like, why didn't he just shoot her to get the car? And even so, how did he even know there was children in the back seat? So...
Yes, because it's dark, and keep in mind, this is the 80s, so they're not in car seats. Like, when Cheryl was found, the mom said that she had been sleeping in the, like, floorboard in front of the passenger seat. So, like, you can't see these kids, but he immediately, she says, shoots into the car, shoots all three of them, like, in the chest, and then they struggle, and then he shoots her, and then she gets in the car and leaves.
Yeah, the thing is really weird, like, they really are believing that the shooter had to know the family. He had to know Diane had 3 kids. He had to know, like, Diane would be in this area.
Like, this was personal. This wasn't some random person that... And also, why would you stop for a random person in the middle of the road at 10 o'clock at night with your 3 kids in the car? Yeah. That's also kind of weird. So they're thinking, okay, well, maybe she knew this person, and that's why she stopped, but she's not telling us the truth for whatever reason.
Yeah, so they're noticing, like, you're really having to twist to make her story work. Like, it's not just like, okay, this story makes sense. They're like, well, you'd have to do this and this and this and this and this. Like, too many, like, weird variables in this story. There's also these little inconsistencies, like these little minor changes. But investigators did not want to make this known to the public that they were doubting Diane, because the public really was backing Diane. They were like, this poor mother who's lost her child. Her other 2 kids are dying. Like, they don't know if they're going to make it. So, and the investigators, too, are trying to, like, doubt themselves. They're like, why would this woman kill her kids? Like, I don't want to believe this. And they also just keep looking for this gun, because if they can find the gun, they find the killer. They take metal detectors to the side of the road. They even mentioned, like, kind of digging up a few areas along the road, because they thought maybe the gun was buried. But still, nothing coming from this. So Diane is also still talking to investigators. Her word vomit just keeps coming out. And she asked one of the detectives, like, are you married? Because, I'm really going to need someone after this. And she said she's happy for Cheryl, because Cheryl's in heaven and she's better off. Which, I understand, maybe you're trying to cope, with your kid dying, so you're happy that they're better off in heaven. Pretty weird statement to say, just kind of weird.
That is something that people say a lot, but it's usually an elderly person or someone who's been sick for a long time. It's not usually a 7-year-old child who was shot to death like an hour before you said this.
And I think also, like, if you're saying it is like a coping mechanism to help you. But I think if you're talking to investigators who understand you just went through something so horribly tragic, like, you can say, like, I'm devastated. Why would this happen to me? Like, you don't have to, like, be putting on a brave face for someone else or making someone else feel better. Like, if maybe she'd said this to her kids, I'd understand more, being like, yes, look, Cheryl is happy. She's in heaven. She's not in pain. But she's saying this to, like, an investigator, and I don't know. It's very, very strange. Speaking of strange, let's just go ahead and dive into Diane's backstory.
Yes, let's do it.
She was born Elizabeth Diane Fredrickson on August 7th, 1955. So she had a lot of siblings really quickly. So her parents were just getting down and busy.
They were getting it on.
It's the 50s, 60s. Maybe there wasn't much else to do. She wasn't really close with her parents. She felt like her mom was too busy being a wife to be a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And they moved around a lot. She really hated her father. She was kind of a loner at school. Then at age 12, her father did start molesting her. She said it wasn't intercourse, but it was a lot of touching and fondling. And also, um, because of this abuse, she had trouble sleeping. And it actually made her so sick, the lack of sleep, like they had to go to the doctor over it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, with her future things, there are a few studies saying that like sleep deprivation in children can lead to developmental issues. So maybe this is why she's having trouble coping with things. Like maybe she's like developmentally just a little bit behind and doesn't really understand.
And this could explain maybe some of her odd behavior in the aftermath of this crime, that people are like, oh, this is suspicious behavior. It could just be odd behavior because of her developmental trajectory up until this point.
Yeah, and so then one day Diane and her dad are driving around, and they're pulled over by the cops. And so her father had been kind of touching her while he was driving, but Diane's like, no, like there's no trouble, nothing happened. And the cops just let them go. But after that, I guess it kind of scared her dad, and he never touched her again.
And the book did say that the cop, like, Diane reports the cop took her dad out of the car and, like, spoke with him privately for a few minutes. And Diane says that she doesn't know what he said, but after that, everything stopped. So, again, in this time frame, this cop probably knew exactly what was happening and was basically like, oh, well, just don't do it anymore and I won't have to do anything about it, I guess. So.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe he didn't have proof and just like speculated, and so he's like,
yeah,
I'm just going to try to scare you straight, and if you didn't do it, then good, and if you did it, well, stop.
Yeah, and he did stop, so okay.
I guess it worked. So Diane did meet Steve Downs when she was 15, and Steve was 7 months older. Steve was a showstopper, apparently, and what I imagine, I don't know if you guys have seen Stranger Things, but Billy from Stranger Things, like in like the latest season, and he like walks by and all the moms are like, ooh, and like all the kids are like, oh my goodness. So that's kind of how they described him in the book. I don't know if he really did look like that. That's just what I'm picturing in my head is that. So
and I did laugh out loud when I was reading your notes and I saw that. So I thought
isn't it like the perfect like mental description?
Yeah. I was just like, yeah, that fits very well.
And so Diane's parents hated Steve, and so she loved that.
Obviously.
Yeah, they started sleeping together, and she did tell Steve about the abuse from her father. I think Steve did say he was like, I didn't really know what to say, but I was just trying to be there for her while she was talking about it.
Yep.
So on November 13th, 1973, they got married. But she started finding herself really lonely. So then, all right, guys, this is weird.
If you get married, Courtney, when you and Kevin get married, if this happens, I'm going to need you to call me up and we're going to have to get an annulment really quickly.
If this happens, I'm calling my lawyer and getting divorce papers. So then, okay, like her and Steve was kind of a little bit of a player, they said. But 2 weeks after their wedding, he went on a date. And he said, I have to keep it because I made this a month prior. And I'm like, guys, but you're married.
It's a big red flag if your new husband goes on a date, first of all, and says, well, I made it before we got married, so I have to keep it. Also, who makes
a date a month in advance? Like, that's so long.
And so, like, did you not know you were going to be married in a month? Like,
also, it gets better because Steve was like, hey, Diane, can you press my pants for me? Will you help me look good for this date? Like,
and she does.
And she does. So, she sits around and she waits, and he doesn't come home until 3 a.m. Yep. That's pretty late. And he was like, oh, my car broke down. Sorry. But she's like, your pants are really clean for a broke down car.
Yeah.
So basically she's kind of realizing like maybe Steve doesn't love me like he wanted me to. I don't really know what to do. I guess the only logical solution is to have a baby.
Obviously. I mean, this marriage is in trouble super quickly, so let's add another human being into the mix. That's the perfect solution.
Yeah, and she's like, the baby will love me. If Steve won't, the baby will. And her mom had given her some birth control pills right before they got married. She didn't tell Steve, but she went ahead and tossed those in the trash. And little Miss Fertile Myrtle over here was pregnant within the month.
Ooh. Diane Downs is the most...
Diane Downs in the merch.
I'm gonna just let you go ahead. I don't need to make that statement.
Yeah, so we'll all find out very soon that Diane is the most fertile person in the world, probably. So she gives birth to Christy, and then she realized after she gives birth that she hates Steve even more.
Yep.
But eventually she's starting to notice, like, even having Christy, it didn't really make her that happy. So what she wanted was an education, and she wanted a career, and then she just kind of up and left and joined the Air Force. She was just like, bye, guys.
So she's like,
peace
here's
out.
my 6-month-old baby. Take good care of her. I'm gonna go join the Air Force. See you later. Bye, Steve.
But then she only served for 3 weeks, and she was discharged due to blisters. And I really want to see a picture of these blisters.
I need to know the severity of these blisters.
So she goes back to Steve, which you'll soon find is a pattern. She's always going back to Steve.
Diane and Steve.
So she goes back to Steve, and her and Steve seem to be fighting a lot. And she actually did end up one time getting a concussion from a physical fight with him. Then she got pregnant again.
Yep, let's solve this problem.
So then she disliked him even more.
Of course you do.
But she stayed because of the child. And so this child was Cheryl. And Cheryl cried a lot.
Cheryl was not an easy baby.
She was not very happy. So then, with all this, Diane was like, all right, no more babies. Let's not do it. So Steve went and got a vasectomy, but he didn't come back for the test to make sure it worked. And Diane got pregnant again.
Fertile Myrtle.
Fertile Myrtle over here. So Fertile Myrtle is like, I don't want another baby. I can't do it. And so she has an abortion. This just kind of shows, like, either Diane's making things up in her head or Steve's complete and total, like, ignorance to what's going on around him. But in Halloween 1976, Diane, she takes the kids and she leaves. And Steve is, like, kind of surprised. He was like, we weren't really having any problems.
He's like, what? I didn't know.
I mean, I don't know what happened. But they get back together. And then they break up. And they get back together. And they break up. And you get the picture.
We all know those relationships.
Yeah. So, and quit posting about it on Facebook. Because we don't like them anymore. Anyway. So, 2 years after she has the abortion, she's starting to regret it. She names her lost baby Carrie. And now she's like, hey, Steve, can you get that vasectomy reversed? And he's like, yeah, no. Like, this isn't going to be like a Michael and Jan situation from The Office. You know, like, snip, 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 snip.
Like, we said no more babies. But
yeah.
Diane thinks that she can, like, replace the soul of the baby that she aborted. So that's how she describes it in her decision to get pregnant again. She's like, well, I killed this baby, but I can just have another one, and that'll be like the baby that I lost. Like, that's her mindset when she's trying to get pregnant this time.
Really, really not the way it works.
Not really.
And so Diane said, you know what? Fine, Steve. I'll go find a donor. But she's not like turkey baster it up in me donor. She's like, I'm going to go have sex with people donor.
That's how you usually do it.
And Steve says, like, he does not remember her saying this. Maybe he selective hearing. Maybe she just said it in her head.
So it goes back to, is Diane the most manipulative, vindictive person ever? Or is Steve just a moron? Maybe both. I don't know.
We don't know. I think it's both. So she has 3 affairs. She finally gets pregnant with a 19-year-old boy. And Stephen Daniel Downs is born. So basically Diane is starting to realize her patterns. She absolutely loves being pregnant. She loves all that goes along with that.
Except the baby part.
Yeah, she's not good at being a mom.
She doesn't, like, want to actually take care of the baby when it gets there, but, like, when she's pregnant, she just has these, like, romantic ideas of being a mother and being pregnant and having this child that's going to love you unconditionally. And then the baby gets there and she's like, oh my gosh, like, you are crying again. Like, you want food, you want stimulation. Like, this is too much. Let me get pregnant again, because I love the way that feels, because that makes me feel good.
Yeah, and poor Cheryl, she really gets the shit end of the stick. It seems like, if something just fell off the counter, she'd be like, well, Cheryl did it. And Cheryl's like, I'm in my bedroom. And she's like, you did it. It's all Cheryl. And, like, I don't know, looking at some of the pictures, like, it just kind of breaks my heart, because Cheryl just does not look happy in any of the pictures. Like,
Yes.
in the pictures of the kids, like, Christy's smiling, everyone's smiling. But Cheryl just looks so unhappy, and it absolutely breaks my heart.
It's so sad.
And Cheryl even said one time to a babysitter, and she said, do you have a gun? I want to shoot myself. My mom says I'm bad. Like, that is heartbreaking. And she was like 5 or 6 at this time, I think. Like, she was not old. Like, she was
very, very young. Yes.
And so basically, Diane, like, if she can't find a babysitter, she just leaves the kids alone. And the oldest kid is 6 and the youngest 18 months. So she'll just leave them home alone. She's like, bye. So she divorces Steve and she jumps, from man to man. She wants to be a surrogate, but she doesn't pass the testing. But she keeps just kind of going back, and I guess she's learning from her mistakes, air quotes, that she made in her evaluations, and she finally gets approved, and it works. And maybe it's good she's a surrogate and not having her own kid, because another quote to Cheryl was, you're so bad, if you don't obey mommy, you deserve to be killed. So, that's pretty eerie, like, thinking about it in hindsight, but...
And I don't care who you are, and I don't care that I'm not a parent. I'm going to tell you how to parent. You never tell your kids that they deserve to be killed. The end.
And, like, I understand, telling your kid, like, no, like, don't do that. That's a bad thing to do. But telling the kid they're, like, inherently bad, like, has so many, like, self-esteem issues. It's just...
Your children are not bad people. Your children make bad choices. And please make sure you're clear about that when you talk to them.
But,
okay, thanks.
So, Diane's just a shitty mom, y'all. So, neighbors see her kids home alone a lot. They'd come to their houses because they're hungry. They'd be outside with no shoes or jackets in the winter. And so one neighbor is super concerned, and so she writes Diane a letter, and she's like, look, I will watch your kids. Like, please just don't leave your kids alone. I'll watch them. And another neighbor would feed them regularly. She worked at the post office, and her boss knew that she would, like, hit her kids. And he even suggested counseling, but he just didn't really tell anyone. He didn't really, like, follow up. And I think maybe this is just, like, what is this, the 70s, the 80s?
The 80s, yeah. 70s and 80s, yeah.
So, I mean... that was, like, prime time of latchkey kids. That's prime time of don't get your nose involved. I'm hoping if that was today, maybe something would happen. Maybe not, but...
And a lot of people have this, like, intense fear of calling Child Protective Services on someone because they don't want to get their kids taken away. And, obviously in this case, it would have benefited everyone. But most of the time, CPS are not going to take your kids away unless it's, like, a super terrible situation. So if you ever suspect something, like, you just go ahead and make that call, because you're not the one who is determining that there's something wrong. You're just the one voicing suspicions. And if there is something wrong, then CPS is going to find it out, and they're going to make sure that those kids are safe. And if there's nothing wrong, then they're going to clear them, and everyone's still going to be fine. So you don't need to hesitate to call CPS because you're afraid that they're going to remove someone's kids, because they're only going to do that if it's substantiated, in which case those kids need help, and you should help protect them. Which people today still feel this way, but I feel like it was even more so in the 70s and 80s. Like, we're not getting the government involved in our business. Like, we know... like, everything's going to be fine. I don't need to butt in where I'm not wanted or I don't belong. So, just quick Jaclyn soapbox corner, the end.
Yeah, and so Diane, and she's working full-time at the post office. She's pregnant with the surrogate baby, and because she's pregnant, she's like, hey, men, sleep with me. You can't get me pregnant. I'm already pregnant. Win-win. She's having a lot of affairs. And most of them are married men, and her kids are also super sick a lot, and they're just kind of sick. I mean, they wear no shoes, no jacket out in the winter, so probably why.
Maybe has something to do with it.
Yeah, and the neighbors, they're still worried, but there's really not much they can do. So she has a surrogate baby, and I really want to know if the parents are like, oh, fuck.
Right? Like, and I can't find any information online about this person, which I don't want to invade someone's privacy, but I just curious nature, want to know if this baby knows that, and these parents know that, because I don't know if this was a thing of the times that they weren't able to do this then, but this baby is 50% biologically Diane. So this isn't an IVF situation where they took the biological mother's eggs and fertilized them and put them in someone else to carry. Like, this was just this husband used his sperm to fertilize Diane's eggs, and then I guess essentially the mom adopted the baby. Because this did happen in Kentucky, and it did say that Diane had 5 days to decide if she wanted to relinquish her parental rights. So I don't know what happens if you decide, oh no, actually I want to keep this baby, and now this couple, like, the husband has a baby by someone that they're not going to be able to keep because the mother decided that. So it's just very weird. So I don't know. I guess that could still happen today if a mom has issues, with the eggs themselves. But in my understanding, typically now a surrogate is the biological parents' eggs and sperm fertilized and put into a surrogate. But I just want to kind of make that clear that this baby is 50% Diane.
Yeah, because I think there are some situations, I know women can get like a sperm donor, so I know you can get like an egg donor also.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
But suck if Diane's your egg donor, but I'm sure the kid is fine, I'm sure.
Yes.
I think Diane had a lot of factors going in that made her a little wookie.
Spoilers.
Spoiler! I mean, y'all, we already said it, Knife 5 killer. But, yeah, and so around this time is when she does fall in love with Robert Knickerbocker. So her diary mentions Nick all the time. And so they're like, okay, we're going to go talk to him and his wife, Charlene. So Charlene, I don't know how she did this, but she knew he had an affair and she forgave him. She was like, it's okay. It's fine. Yep. It happens, I guess.
But, like, this wasn't a one-time affair. Like,
No.
Diane and Nick were on and off all the time, and Charlene knew about it and still took him back every time.
Yeah. So. Shit gets real. So,
whew.
Yeah, I don't know how I would be a little, maybe I'd forgive Kevin, but I'd be petty. And I know I shouldn't be, but.
And she has even more reason to be mad at them, but.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it gets worse. So, Nick was like, okay, this will just be a simple hookup, but Diane became pretty obsessive. So, Diane wanted to marry him, but he didn't want kids. He had a vasectomy at like 21, I think it was. So he's like, no, I don't want kids. And so Diane kind of like was like, hey kids, go move in with Steve, because she has this new boyfriend. But then Nick ended up breaking up with Diane. And so he had to tell his wife about the affair, but because, as I told you before, Diane's kind of sleeping around, Diane gives Nick an STD. And so, in a very unfortunate situation, all three people have an STD.
Yep.
So, Nick keeps trying to, like, distance himself from Diane, but Diane gets a rose tattoo with Nick's name.
That doesn't sound like a simple, quick affair to me, Nick.
So, but Diane still kind of has Steve around too. Like, she's just not happy with one man,
No.
So, there is an incident where she does lock herself in the bathroom of the trailer they were living in, with a gun, and she's like, I'm going to kill myself. And so she fires into the floor. So Steve breaks down the door, and Diane holds the gun on him, but he, like, ended up taking it from her. Later, because her and Steve aren't living together at this time, they're just kind of hooking up, I guess. she had Steve set her trailer on fire for some insurance money.
Yeah, like you do.
So she goes and she moves back in with Steve. And then Diane has another incident with Steve and a gun. So she's waving a gun at him, and he tries to reach for it, and she's in a car, and she drives away and pulls him with the car.
And this is in front of their children. Like, their children are standing outside and see this whole incident.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't even know. Like, that's domestic assault. Don't do that. And so Diane is trying to like start her own surrogate parenting business.
This just like blew my mind. I was like, Diane, what the hell are you doing now?
It's like you kept reading and it's just like, Diane, how do you have this much time? Like, yes. What is happening?
And she is writing in this diary a lot, and she's writing a lot of letters, and I'm like, you have 3 kids to take care of, but you just love being pregnant so much that now you're going to start your own surrogate parenting business, but you're also still going to be one of the surrogates. So that's interesting because there's supposed to be a confidentiality level there, so I'm pretty sure the parents are going to know if the person who is doing their paperwork and handling their money and everything is also pregnant, and then suddenly when their baby's born, she's no longer pregnant. Okay.
Yeah, and so, but Diane is still under contract in Kentucky, but Charlene, she calls that clinic, and she's like, hey, Diane's starting her new company and gave me an STD, which was a violation of the contract, and so they terminate that contract, and they're just like, goodbye.
And then her surrogate parenting business just doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, it just kind of ends.
Yeah.
So Diane and Nick are just still on and off, on and off, on and off. But one time when they're off, she is requesting a work transfer. So they are living in Arizona at this point. So she was born in Oregon, but they all did move to Arizona. And so she's going to transfer back to Oregon. She's going to move back. And she requests this transfer because Nick says he's not going to leave his wife. So then, I don't really know what she said, but then after he's like, no, I'm not going to leave my wife, he's like, but I will get a matching rose tattoo with you.
Nick, what are you doing?
Honey, tattoos are permanent.
Like,
yeah,
come on.
So then after, he agrees to this.
But he does refuse to get her name to it. He's like, I'm not going to get your name like you got mine, but I'll get the matching rose. Okay.
Weird. So then Diane's like, never mind, I don't want to transfer. But the boss is like, too bad, so sad. You're having sex with every guy in this office. You're leaving. He didn't say that, but I'm sure he's like, I am not tearing up this transfer request.
Nope.
So Diane and the kids moved back to Oregon where her parents are. So she thought Nick would transfer too, but no, he broke it off again and says, I just don't want to be a dad. But yeah, so it just seems Nick was just kind of happy when she left. He was like, maybe I can finally get her out of my life. Like maybe this was like almost like an addiction, I guess. Like he was almost like addicted, like he couldn't quit her. Yeah, not to quote Brokeback Mountain, but
it definitely sounded like that he realized this was a toxic relationship and he kept wanting to break up. But then, I mean, Diane was pretty obsessive, so it's like he just was under her spell and
yeah, and maybe he just kept being like, okay, one last time,
yep,
and it'll be over. One tattoo and it'll be over. I don't know.
Yep. So at the time of the shooting, Diane and her kids have only been living in Oregon for like 6 to 8 weeks, I think. So they haven't been there very long. So as Courtney mentioned, the police had been interviewing Nick and his wife because from her diary, she was clearly obsessed with this man. And so they asked him about the guns to find out when Diane last had them. And he was like, yeah, I saw the .22 pistol in Diane's car right before her and the kids moved up to Oregon. So he knows that she had it fairly recently because when police asked Diane about this pistol, she says, oh no, Steve had it. Like, I don't have this gun. I gave it to him. But then Nick is like, no, like literally as she was packing her car to move, I saw it in her trunk. So Nick thinks that she shot the kids, and so he is fearing for himself and for his wife's safety. Again, Diane's diary is just full of Nick, and she doesn't really mention her kids at all. until the last few entries before the shooting. So the last couple of days, she's talking about her kids all the time and how much she loves them and how wonderful they are, when up to this point in these huge volumes of diaries that she has, she's never mentioning her kids. So a few days
And I think it said, like, she only mentioned them, like, in reference to Nick.
Yeah.
Like, she was like, oh, the kids had such a great day with Nick. And Nick was later like, I never hung out with her kids. Like, I never saw them.
And she would say, like, oh, the kids say hi, or, oh, they drew you a picture. And he's like, I, like, actively avoided being around her when she was with her kids. Like, I never really saw them because I didn't want to be a dad. I didn't want to confuse anything for them. So he's like, what do you mean the kids say hi and drew me a picture? Like, I don't even know them. I don't spend any time with them. And so a few days after the shooting, the police asked Diane to do a reenactment of what she said happened. So you can find the video online of this. This is the most
horrible.
chilling video. So when they first start the shot, she's in the car and she's like prepping her hair and like fixing her lipstick. Like she's like looking in the rearview mirror, making sure that she looks okay before the cop comes over to pretend to be the man in the street. So she then mimics like getting out of her car and she's like giggling and laughing and she's like, and I threw my keys like this, and she's like joking and she's like, and then I hopped back in the car, and then she jumps in and then she hits her elbow and she's like, oh, I hit my elbow, and she's like giggling, and then she's like, this hurts worse than, and then she just stops. So
I think she caught herself, but it really is like a super like chilling and disgusting video.
Yes.
Because she's just like laughing, like talking about, I don't know, like the whole situation. And like, I don't know, it's just, I try to like be like, well, maybe she's like coping, but this is just, it's not. It's something completely different.
This is beyond that, guys. So as Courtney mentioned, the bullet casings that were found in the car were from a .22 pistol. So the bullets that they emptied from Diane's .22 rifle, they could tell were at one point in the same weapon that had killed the children. So at this point, they can't prove that Diane's .22 pistol was the one that shot the children. However, they can tell from the markings on the bullet that the ones that were in her gun in her closet had also at one time been in the same weapon that shot the children. So this is a pretty big point of physical evidence, but it's not like hard enough evidence to convict her in court. So as they're doing this investigation, like they're making sure, and they also mentioned that Oregon does have a pretty strict right to a speedy trial. So from the point of the arrest, they have a maximum of 90 days to go to trial. So they're not going to arrest Diane until they're sure that they can build this super strong case against her, because obviously if she gets acquitted, you can never try her again for this crime. So that's why.
Yeah, and the bullets are like super easy to be argued in
Yes.
court because they're like, well, it could be from this gun or this gun or this gun. So it can't be like that. This is the reason she's guilty. Like, you can't use that as your only piece of evidence.
So during the investigation, the police asked to remove the bullet fragments from Christy and to photograph her wounds, as part of the investigation. But Diane says no. So that's interesting, because if you're trying to find the man who shot your children, I wouldn't think that you would obstruct the investigation in any way. So they're like, well, we kind of have to do this anyway. And so they subpoenaed her to do a polygraph exam. And at this point, her dad decides that she should probably get an attorney. So she hires a defense attorney named Jim Jagger. So her attorney had a private polygraph conducted, and she failed it, which we've talked about polygraph tests before, that they're not 100% accurate. So we're not going to use that as damning evidence against Diane. But she did release a letter to law enforcement telling them to not come near her or her kids. So now the people in the public are starting to be like, she seems like she might be a suspect in this, or the police might think of her as a suspect. So Diane, as we mentioned, had been shot in the arm, so she did end up having to have surgery on that arm, and they put like a steel plate in there because she had like shattered the bone. And then the day after her surgery, she's told that the state took custody of Christy and Danny. And so they take all of her visitation rights away, so at this point she's not even allowed to visit them in the hospital. So the police speak to Heather, which is the friend that Diane went to visit the night that her children were shot. And so Heather does confirm that Diane showed up around the time she said she did, that she had the picture of the horse. Heather had actually already gotten a horse the week before, so the kids were petting the horse and they were playing with Heather's kids. And then one of Heather's neighbors said that she left around 9:40 because I think she remembered like she was watching a show or something, and so she knew kind of a specific time. So it was 10:30 when Diane and her kids arrived at the hospital. So they're trying to figure out for these 50 minutes, where was everyone? What were they doing? So then a man named Joseph Inman calls in a tip and says that he had been in the area visiting his sister, and he was driving down Old Mohawk Road around this time, and he was behind a red car with Arizona license plates because his son mentioned that he feels like cars from Arizona are always red, meaning that they matched the red license plate. So that kind of stuck out in his head. He said this car was only traveling about 5 to 7 miles per hour, and his own speedometer wasn't even registering. So this car is like driving down the road super slowly. So he follows it for about 2 to 3 minutes until there's like a straight pass where he can go around. And so he says it is too dark to see the passengers or the drivers or anything, but there's no like screams coming from the car. There's no sign of anything wrong in it. They're just driving really, really slowly. So this encounter had taken place 0.8 of a mile from where the shooting happened. And again, it took her how long to get to the hospital? So, and Diane had said earlier that she raced to the hospital as soon as everything happened. And another thing that was interesting is that she had this towel, like, very intricately wrapped around her own arm, to, like a tourniquet type thing to keep it from bleeding out. But you have 3 children shot in the chest, and you have this one towel, and you choose to wrap it around your arm.
But she would also constantly be like, well, of course I had to save myself. If I would have bled out, then we wouldn't have made it. But I mean, she only had a gunshot wound to her arm that wasn't like bleeding profusely.
Yes.
But that was her like her justification of it. She's like, well, I had to like make myself better because I was the one that had to get to the hospital. But they're still like, that doesn't really add up. Like, it's just a gunshot wound to the arm.
Like, she was, I think, 4.5 miles from the hospital, and it took her, like, 22 minutes to get there, according to the timeline, but in 4.5 miles, you're not going to bleed out from a gunshot wound to the arm. But your children who were shot in the chest, they might bleed out in the time that it's taking you to wrap this towel around your own arm to get there. And so...
Because all the doctors were saying, like, a gunshot wound to the chest is, like, a fatal wound to who, like, especially in children. It's, like... that is a fatal wound because, there's so much going on there. There's your lungs, there's your spine, like, all that's happening. And so these were very super fatal shots. Yes. But Diane just has one in her arm?
Yep. So Diane loves the media. So she speaks to every reporter that lives in Oregon, apparently. And she does tons of interviews, and she's just very strange in her interviews. Like, at one point, she comments that everyone keeps saying that she's lucky, and she's like, I'm not lucky. I can't even tie my shoes right now. My kids are lucky, because if I had been killed, I wouldn't have gotten them to the hospital. Your kids are lucky. One of your children is dead. One is paralyzed from the chest down. One had a massive stroke, and at this time can barely speak, can barely write. But they're the lucky ones, because you were able to get them to the hospital, quote-unquote, in time. But you can't even tie your shoe. And so at one point she does an interview and she says, quote, if I had shot my own children, I would have done a good job of it. I would have done a good job, and I would have waited until they died and then cried crocodile tears, end quote.
Diane, that's what you did.
Except you didn't cry. You were just weird. But
you just giggled.
Like, okay, this doesn't make any sense because you can't just shoot your children, and by the time the police find them, they're clearly long dead, and you haven't even taken them to the hospital. Like obviously you're going to be under suspicion if you do that. So what you did makes the most sense if you were the one that shot your children. Like, you shot them, and then you got to the hospital in a fairly reasonable amount of time to be like, oh, I tried, versus if you wait until you're sure they're dead, and then you take them somewhere, everyone's going to know it was you because you didn't get them help. So no, what you did is exactly what you would have done if you shot your children. And At one point, she has an interview with a reporter named Anne Bradley, and she, like, keeps talking about the kid's injuries, like, completely straight-faced. Like, she's not crying, she's not upset. She's like, the blood just kept coming out of Cheryl's mouth, and it's just, like, super graphic and detailed. And so Anne Bradley at one point asked her to stop because, like, she's feeling ill. And then you see Diane, like, smirking. Like, she just, like, oh, that's funny. That's cute that you want me to stop.
Whatever.
Oh, boy. So on June 16th, the police interview Christy for the first time. And so they're asking her questions. And at this point, she's still having trouble speaking. So they're having to kind of frame their questions in, like, a yes or no answer. Asking her questions that she can, like, draw a picture to kind of answer what they're asking. And the information they get from this interview says that it was a woman who shot her and that no one outside the family was at the car. But that's about the extent of what they get from her. So obviously at this point, she's not going to be able to testify. Like, any defense attorney is going to just tear her apart on the stand. So they'll have to wait to arrest Diane until they're sure that Christy is able to give this testimony. So Christy's put into foster care. They said that she never asked about her mom or really wanted to see her. Danny's still in the hospital at this time, so he will be in the hospital for about 4 months, I believe, and then he's going to end up going to the same foster home as well.
And this foster family seriously seemed like the ideal foster family. Like, they were so loving and caring, and apparently they had like a bunch of kids, but they worked so well with Christy and Danny just to try and make them feel safe. I think the foster mom even said, like, Christy would wake up with nightmares and I would just go sit there so she wouldn't wake up alone. Mm-hmm. You know, just trying to, like, help her after this, like, huge, like, horrible situation, just trying to make this kid feel like she's safe now.
Mm-hmm. And as time goes on, Christy will start to talk about the abuse that she endured even before the shooting, and the police were very careful to make sure that her foster mom didn't, like, that they didn't say anything to, like, prompt her to say something. So they're like, make sure whatever she says, you just, you know, okay. And they're like, you can comfort her, but don't, you know, say anything about, oh my God, that's awful, or ask any questions. Like, don't give her anything to in any way taint what she's going to say later. So they were, like, super careful to make sure that, and that has to be so hard as that foster mom to hear these horrible things and all you can respond is just, okay, like, oh, goodness. So the police asked Nick if he is willing to call up Diane, because Nick's like, yeah, if I think she's going to confess to anybody, it would probably be me. So Oregon and Arizona are both one-party states, in that only one party has to be aware of a recording for it to be legal. So they're able to record all of their phone calls because Nick has consented to it. So she tells him about failing the polygraph, and she says that nothing is going to help, and so she's just, you know, upset and just ranting. And again, Diane is wonderful with word vomit. She's just talking nonstop. So later, Diane's being interviewed, and now she says that the man who shot her knew her name, so that he mentioned her name and he mentioned her tattoo. So at one point, one of the investigators is asking her why she just stood by and let this man shoot her kids. Like, you're standing right there and you don't attempt to intervene in any way. And then she was like, well, he wasn't there to take the car. He was there to hurt the kids. But, you know, you said the whole time that when you stopped, this guy wanted to take your car. And then she's like, oh, my arm hurts. And then she just ends the interview. But later, as she's saying that she knew who this person was, and the police are like, okay, well, tell us who it was then. And she's like, no, I'm not going to help you at all because you're accusing me and you think that I did this. So if I remember anything, I'm not even going to tell you about it. And you can work on this case for 20,000 years if you have to, is what she says. So, okay, if you really didn't do this, yeah, you're probably mad that you're being accused of it, but also you would want to find out who did do it because this man shot your children. I don't think it's going to help to be like, oh, well, I'm not going to help you. Figure it out on your own. Nana boo boo. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, she's a mess.
Yes. So her defense attorney orders a psychiatric test, and so they see some answers that align with antisocial personality disorder, which is some of the same stuff that they found as they were doing her personality testing to become a surrogate that she initially failed. But then they do the test again, and everything is normal. So it's like, okay, you just went from having signs of antisocial personality to everything down the board is normal. So it's suspected that somebody coached her on what to say in order to pass this test.
Which she's done before with her surrogate interview.
Yes,
So
exactly.
maybe she knows, like, oh, I answered this wrong. Okay, I'll adjust and now answer it correctly.
Yeah, like, oh, I figured this out from before. I know how to fool these. So at this point, Christy and Danny are both in the foster home. They're both doing really well there. And Steve is allowed visitation. So he comes and he takes the kids and he's like staying in a hotel with them overnight. So Steve calls Diane and was like, would you like to just see the kids? And she's like, yeah, of course. So he's like, okay, like let's meet up at this park and we'll just like walk by so you can see them. But like don't come over and talk to us. Like stay hidden, but that way you can see them and see that they're okay. So, of course, they do this, and of course, Diane goes up to them, and so she's talking with Christy. She sees Danny asleep in the back seat, and she's like, he just looks normal. He doesn't look paralyzed, and she says in a lot of her interviews that if she had Danny, he wouldn't be paralyzed anymore, because all you have to do is love him enough, and he'll walk again. Because
yeah,
that's how
it's
works.
mind, what is it, mind over body. And so if he wills himself to walk, he'll just walk.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. Just tell every paralyzed person that that's how it works, and it'll be good. So then Diane leaves with Christy and she's like, oh yeah, like we're going to be gone really quick. Like we're going to come right back. And so the time comes and goes where she's supposed to bring her back and she doesn't. So Steve is like panicking and he's like, oh, like I'm going to get in trouble, but I'm going to have to call the police. Like what if she hurts her? So Steve is scared of Diane. So Steve suspects that Diane might have done something, but yet he lets her just leave with Christy. And so the foster parents know something's wrong, like the day they get back from this visit, because they have been making so much progress and now they're just like super withdrawn and they're very quiet and they won't talk to them a lot. Christy's therapist that she's been seeing says that she just like shut down completely at this point, but nobody knows why until Diane decides that she wants to get Steve in trouble for letting her see the kids, which, keep in mind, Diane's not allowed to see the kids, so she's also going to get in trouble for this. But she writes a note to Nick letting him know that Steve let her see the kids. And so she sends this letter, and then she calls the post office, and she's like, whatever you do, do not let Nick open this. Tell Nick that he cannot open this. Like, I said something I shouldn't have. He needs to send it back. Like, obviously making sure to ensure that he's going to open this letter. So, of course, he opens it, and he turns it into the cops. So, Diane and Steve are both charged with contempt of court for disobeying the judge's order, and they both get a 1-year suspended sentence. So, not a whole lot. But Diane does file tort claims like negligence, recklessness, etc. against the Child Services, the Lane County District Attorney, and the Lane County Sheriff's Office. And so she says weird things like this lady from the hospital took Christy out into the freezing cold, and they're like, it was June, and it was just so she could see something besides being in this hospital room all the time. But, you know, she's just like filing all these complaints and just being Diane. So then Diane's like, oh, you know what I miss? I miss being pregnant. So she finds this guy on her mail route and he gets her pregnant and he's like, I don't want a baby. I didn't know that you were like trying to get pregnant. I thought that we were protected. And so he's like, no, I don't want anything to do with you. And as far as I can tell, his name has never been released. So we don't know anything about this man.
Yeah, he literally, like, after, like, she kept being obsessive and he, like, moved. He, like, moved apartments and was like, nope, bye, please no.
So now in Christy's therapy, so things are starting to progress, and so her therapist tells her, okay, how about you write down the name of who shot you on this piece of paper, and we'll put it in an envelope, and at the end of the session, if you want me to open it, I will, and if not, then we'll toss it in the fire and we'll burn it. So she's like, okay, and so they do this several times, and so every single time, you know, she's throwing it into the fire. And at this point, we have another phone call recorded with Nick. And so now she's saying that there was actually more than one person who shot her, that there were 2 people, and that one of them held her back while the other one shot the kids. And said that these people mentioned Steve, and she only saw what one of them looked like because they were wearing ski masks, but she was able to take one of them off, and she's like, I don't know who he was, but, like, I saw him and I would recognize him. What? How many times have you changed this story? Like, you don't go from one person to 2 people to it was a stranger.
I'm taking off a mask. Like,
what? There's no mask.
What's happening?
Oh my God, Diane. So, oh my gosh, this part was super chilling. So the police have these like life-size dolls made of Christy and Danny and Cheryl to try to like set up what happened in the car. So they bring these dolls to the house. They let them actually like hang on to the dolls for a while to just like get used to them and not make it like something that's like weird or scary. So then the police and the DA come over, and so they set up the car, and they're like, okay, can you tell us where everybody was? And Christy actually was like, well, there's only one couch, like I need 2 couches. So they're like, oh, well, in the basement we have 2 couches, so we'll go down there. So she's wanting to like make sure everything matches exactly how it was. So she puts everyone exactly in the car where they were found, and they ask her to mimic the shooting. And so she does, and she's crying, and the police say that like according to their evidence, every single thing that she does is exactly what happened. So at this point in Christy's therapy, she allows him to open the envelope that says who shot them, and it just says, my mom. So finally, on February 28th, 1984, which was 9 months after the shooting, they're able to arrest Diane and serve the search warrants. So they meet her at her work, so they finally see her come into the parking lot, and they're like, today's the day, Diane. She's like, oh, okay. So she wasn't like she knew it was
just
coming.
Like, whatever. Cool.
Yeah.
Because didn't they say that, like, she almost seemed relieved when she was arrested? Like, she was just kind of like, okay, like, finally. Like,
yeah, like, I can finally, like, be acquitted and get on with my life. Great, is how she's thinking. And so they do the search warrants for her car and her parents' home where she had been living at the time, her post office locker, like where she kept all of her things at work. And so they charge her with 1 count murder, 2 counts attempted murder, and 2 counts assault in the first degree. So she pleads not guilty to all charges, but they revoke her bail. So again, as we mentioned in the I-5 killer episode, while she's waiting trial, she starts having this like sexting, letter writing relationship with Randy Woodfield, aka the I-5 killer. So she writes all kinds of men while she's in prison, so she's still just doing her thing. So they finally get ready for trial. The jury consists of 9 women, 3 men, and 3 alternates. And as was the case with the Lacey Peterson case, the jury was not sequestered. And again, this has been 9 months since the shooting, and there's a ton of information out there. Diane herself went on every talk show available, but they're not sequestered. So the judge and the jurors drive out to Old Mohawk Road so they can see everything. Heather is the first witness to help establish the timeline, and then the man I spoke of earlier, Joseph Inman, testifies about seeing the car going super slowly. And again, Diane was 4.5 miles from the hospital where she said the shooting happened, but according to the timeline, it took her 22 minutes to get there.
And this seemed like very rural roads. Like, this isn't like 4 miles in New York City, which would take you 2 hours. Like, this is just like straight down the road, no traffic, small town USA. You can get there faster.
Probably a speed limit of like 45-ish. If I have 3 bleeding kids in the car, I'm probably going like 75, but you know. And so the nurses from the hospital that night testify about Diane's just weird demeanor and comments. Like at one point she's like, well, can I go to work tomorrow? And if not tomorrow, at least the day after. And what she commented about her car being new and is it damaged? All the doctors that were there testify. And one of the doctors said that she said, quote, I know Christy has sustained brain damage and I don't want you to sustain her life, end quote. But there was no sign of brain damage at this point.
Like, I think this was before she even had her stroke.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
There was nothing.
Yes. So now poor Christy gets on the stand. So Christy is 9 years old at this point. So they have her demonstrate that she understands the difference between a truth and a lie. And then they ask her to relay what happened that night. So she says that there wasn't anyone on the road. There were no people around. She says that her mom just pulled over. She got out. She opened the trunk. And then she shoots Cheryl and then Danny and then her. So the defense attorney, Jagger, starts asking her a lot of questions, and there's pretty good transcripts in the book of this, and like Courtney and I were stressed out and overwhelmed and confused.
Yeah, it was horrible because mostly they were asking her like yes or no questions, you know, to try and help her since she's so young, and it was just seriously just like he was just like, oh, did you guys go to the beach this day? Are you confusing this day with the beach? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And like sometimes Christy just wouldn't respond because I mean, it was super overwhelming reading all these questions. Like, I was just like, oh, I just want to be like, shut up. Please shut up. Please stop asking me questions. And I can't imagine how she felt.
Yes, it was terrible. And also, I mean, Christy's 9 and she's had a stroke. So, like, her response time is slower, her verbal processing time, her speech, like, all of these things are a bit delayed for what they would be for a typical 9-year-old because of what she's been through. And you're just, like, firing all of these questions about her and you're jumping all over the place. And so, basically, the defense attorney does this so long that he wants to ask for an extension to the next day. But the district attorney, Fred Hughey's like, no, I don't want her to stress about this for another night. And so the judge agrees, so they have a short recess, and then they go back, so that way Christy isn't having to have this anxiety one more night of having to get on the stand. So now Dr. Peterson, which is Christy's therapist, testifies and says that Christy wrote the name on the envelope and that Christy at one point made a safe and a not safe list, which is so devastating. So on the not safe list, she had her mom and her dad, and on the safe list, she had her foster parents and Dr. Peterson and the DA, Fred Hughey. So, like, this is just devastating. Like, this poor kid.
Because they said there was, like, no one from her life before the shooting who was on the safe list besides, like, Cheryl and Danny.
Yes.
So besides that, there was no one from her past life. So it's just, like, how heartbreaking it is for her life. And even I think the foster mom was saying, like, you could tell, like, she had been made to believe that things in the past were her fault.
Yes.
Because they said, like, she was just like, oh, like, this happened. She's like, I'm so sorry. It's my fault, you know. And she was very, like, used to doing, like, all the chores, even though she was so young. Like, it was a very odd situation. So, clearly, even before this shooting, like, she did not have a very happy upbringing.
Yes. So, of course, we mentioned the bullet evidence, and they also set up the same scene that they had Christy and Danny do and show how the scene played out. And they talk about, you know, where the bullets were and the blood spatter. And, again, both of those are kind of iffy physical evidence. So, it's not like a definitive evidence of guilt. So Christy says that the song Hungry Like the Wolf was playing on the tape player during the shooting. So with Diane's car, the tape wouldn't play if the keys were outside of the car. So again, remember Diane said that as she pulled over that she got out and she took her keys for whatever reason and she pretended to throw them when the guy said that he wanted her car. But Christy said during the shooting, this song was playing. So the keys would have had to have been still in the car. So for whatever reason, they play the song in court. And Diane starts, like, singing and, like, dancing and tapping her foot and, like, kind of, you know, mouthing the words. Like, this is the song that was playing when all 3 of your children were shot. But you're, like, having a little mini concert over there.
Yeah, and she's like, no, like, Christy's just confused. We just listen to that song all the time. And I'm like... So she picks out the one song on a whole tape.
Yes.
And says it's playing when the shooting happens. But no, she's confused. Like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
No. So during Nick's testimony, they asked him about the rose tattoo. So apparently now he got it added to say, Sweet Charlene underneath it. So you can imagine how Diane felt about this.
Yeah, they said Diane just kind of, like, was not happy, like visibly not happy.
So the defense calls Diane, so she's basically telling the original story that she told. They call a few other people who report seeing the yellow car that she says that she saw, and then 2 other guys who saw a man hitchhiking who met the description of the man that she said. But again, there's not really a whole lot else to go off of there.
You know, just because a man's hitchhiking doesn't mean he's the man who did it. Like, it's not.
So on June 17th, 1984, after 3 days of jury deliberation, they find Diane guilty of 2 counts assault, 2 counts attempted murder, and 1 count murder. So then her daughter, who she names Amy Elizabeth Downs, was born on June 27th, 1984. So she was adopted out to a family, and her current name is Becky Babcock.
And they also said Diane, like, while she was pregnant, which I think she called her Charity Lynn, and then when she was born called her Amy Elizabeth, but she felt like it was, like, Cheryl come back to her. Like, she was like, this is Cheryl's spirit. This is Cheryl, you know, I don't know. Craziness. Because,
again, as she mentioned earlier, after her abortion and then getting pregnant, she thought that you could just replace a baby, So Diane's psychiatrist had diagnosed her with 3 personality disorders, histrionic, antisocial, and narcissistic. So with these diagnoses, it made her deemed a dangerous offender, which could lengthen her sentence. So she was ultimately sentenced to life plus 50 years in prison. So the first parole board met in 1985 and said that Diane would not be considered for parole until 2009. So, Diane just talks to all of the media and just is still loving talking to these reporters and everything that she does, and then it finds out in the spring of 1987 that she's not going to get an appeal for a new trial. So Fred Hughey, the DA in this case, and his wife adopt Christy and Danny.
Which makes my heart so happy. Because the second he saw her in the hospital was like, I'm going to protect this girl.
Yeah.
And now he adopted her, and it's just so sweet, and I hope she's having a way better life. Yes. I'm sure she is.
Yes. So Diane knows this, and, of course, she's trying to reach out to them, and he's like, nope, I'm ignoring all attempts of communication, I'm returning all of your gifts, like, you're not going to have anything to do with these children ever again. So she's angry, but she says that she's happy that Christy is living with the man who sent her away, so when she remembers who this man is, she can tell him, and she can get out of prison, so... Okay.
Yeah, so one day when Christy's like, by the way, it wasn't my mom, then she's like, perfect, then I can get out.
Yeah. So then, on July 11th, 1987, Diane escapes from prison.
She fucking escapes, y'all.
Yep. So she gets out, and she is found in the house of one of her prison acquaintances' husband. Probably having sex with him, I don't know. So she's found 10 days later. So she's out for 10 days, and she had said in an interview a month before that if she got out, that she would go hug her kids. So obviously during this whole time, Fred Hughey is panicking, and Becky's new parents are panicking, and so she says that the reason she escaped was to find the man who killed her kids, and says that his name is Samasin Timchuk. Okay, don't know who the hell that is and why you've never mentioned him before, but okay, that's interesting.
Also, she was 100% having sex with her prison acquaintance husband because they thought she was pregnant when she came back.
Oh, dear Lord, Diane. Well, I guess she didn't plan her cycle too well that time, or she would have escaped at a different time so she could get pregnant. So because of this, her parole date was changed to 2014 instead of 2009, and she was transferred to New Jersey. And I'm not sure how much later, but she did eventually transfer back to California. So, and as I mentioned before, her daughter was renamed Becky Babcock by her parents. So when Diane escaped, her parents had to tell the babysitter, who Becky's biological mom was, because they had to make sure and protect her. So when Becky is, I think, around 11, she gets her babysitter to tell her the name of her mom. So that's a great babysitter. And tells her that a book was written about her. So Becky goes to Barnes & Noble and gets Small Sacrifices, which again was the book by Anne Rule. So basically she kind of looked through it and then was like, I don't think I want to know all this, and put it away. So all Becky knows at this point is that her mom is in prison, but she doesn't know why. And then when she's 16, her boyfriend rents the movie that Courtney mentioned that was based off of the book. And so this 16-year-old girl watches this dramatized version of her biological mother killing her child and shooting her other two children and giving birth to her at the end of the movie. So I can only imagine how traumatic this was for Becky. And
honestly, Hollywood probably didn't have to dramatize it that much because Diane is dramatic as hell.
That is true. That is true. So when Becky is in her 20s, she decides that she wants to write to Diane. So at first, Diane is super excited to hear from her. And so she asks her questions like what color her eyes are and if she has any siblings. And then Diane writes to her again the very next day on 12 pages and says things like, quote, there's been a secret man, someone very powerful, watching over you all your life for me, end quote. And how she's in jail, so she's safe from the real killer. And she signed it, forever, your mom. And so then the letters just kept getting weirder, and Becky asked her not to contact her again. And her response was, quote, you are a piece of work, Rebecca. And Becky has a son at this time named Christian. And so she wrote that her son Christian could go up to be a killer, and, quote, if you love your little boy, you'll take him far away from there, end quote. So Diane's still batshit crazy. Batshit crazy. So at Diane's 2010 parole hearing, she has a new story about what happened that night. So, and you can watch this parole hearing on YouTube. The whole, I don't know if it's the whole thing, but there's like 10 minutes available of it. And she says that the night that she went out, that she was dating an FBI agent, and someone called her and said that she needed to come pick up these pictures for her boyfriend. So she's like, okay. So she went and did that, and then she went to Heather's house about the horse, and then everything else happened. And so when they asked her about her story changing to the two men, she was like, that was a private phone conversation, because remember, that was from a recording of her talking to Nick. And she says that she was just talking about a dream that she had. So she wasn't changing her story. She was like, oh, I had this dream that this was what happened.
Yeah,
Okay.
and she was like, no, I just gave them like possible scenarios that could have happened. I didn't change my story. And it's like, what? Like, you were there.
What do you mean?
Why are you speculating about what happened?
So in the 2020 episode that Courtney mentioned, Becky actually talks about her life and her realization that Diane is her mom and all of that. But Christy and Danny have never done any kind of interviews. They've never been in the public eye. Fred and his wife have made sure that they stay very private. I did find one article, I believe it was the heavy.com one, that mentions that according to their Facebook pages, that Christy and Danny are both doing well, that they both graduated from college. Christy is married with a baby. So again, this is just possible information that's out there. We don't know how true it is, but hopefully they're doing well. And I forgot to mention earlier the information I quoted with the letters between Diane and Rebecca. That was from a Glamour article. And so Diane Downs is actually up for parole this year, guys, in 2020.
In 2020, but, you know, with coronavirus, that might get pushed back.
Yeah, because a lot of the courts are closed down and a lot of hearings have been postponed, so who knows, but she will be up for parole fairly soon. So,
which is terrifying.
Yes. So that is the insane and tragic story of Diane Downs and her three victims, Christy, Cheryl, and Danny.
A crazy story, and Diane is just... The Small Sacrifices book is really good. You guys should go read it. But it will make you just want to beat your head against the wall, because you're like, I can't even like keep up with this woman's like ramblings and what is she saying? And she says so much shit that we didn't say. It's crazy.
And if you go... So the 2020 episode, like the first 4 parts are available on YouTube, so you can watch those. There's also a lot of just like random news clips from the many, many interviews that she did. So I kind of went down a rabbit hole the other day and watched a whole bunch of shit that I did not need to see. It's disgusting. It really is. But it's out there if you want to check it out and see firsthand for yourself. Of course, I went down a rabbit hole of, is Diane Downs innocent? Because there are still people that claim that she was innocent, that she was railroaded by the police, and there was no physical evidence, that Christy's testimony was coached. But, I mean, I'll let you...
The fact that any time Diane came into Christy's room, her vitals went up alone is a sign.
Yes.
That something happened.
And she was never, like, she didn't want to see her mom. She didn't really talk about her mom. I mean, she clearly said what happened and said that her mom was the one who did it. So I 100% believe that Diana's guilty, not to mention the number of times that she changed her story. It's like very bizarrely too. I mean, it's not little inconsistencies like, oh, well, it was maybe 9:30, it was maybe 9:45, or, you know, anything like that. It was, oh, it was one man, I don't know who he was, and then it was a man that I knew, and now it was 2 men, and it's just bizarre stuff. So I think Diane's guilty, but there's information out there trying to claim her innocence if you want to look into it. But so this has been a super long episode. Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
I don't know. There's nothing good in the world. No, I'm just kidding. So I guess what I have to say is, I don't know, it doesn't seem super happy, but I just want to give a big thank you to all healthcare workers, all grocery store workers,
Yes.
all first responders, all janitors and garbage men. And I know I'm probably leaving a bunch of people out, but, you know, like we did have to go to the store yesterday, try and get stuff. And there's just so many employees just working really diligently to clean things off. clean all the handles on the buggies and clean, the keypads, everything. They're really trying to do their best, and they're also putting themselves in danger because they are being exposed to so many people, but
Yes.
they're doing so. And I know people are being so mean because they're hoarding toilet paper and all this stuff,
They is in random people, not the employees at the grocery store.
Because people are being mean to them. And like, even when I was at Walmart and I was looking for something, and it was like, an employee was like, is it up on the top shelf? Like, I'll get it for you. Super, super helpful. And they're being put through a lot of stress. So just a big thank you to them. Like, it's not going unnoticed what you're doing. So yeah, just go out and, be nice to people, because everyone's having a hard time. I know my like anxiety and depression is not going well recently with all this going on.
It is rough.
Yeah,
with social
and so
isolation, guys.
Just stay home, and if you have to go out, wash your hands. Take some I take Lysol wipes in a bag with me and clean things off, and just be nice to people who are out there. Stay 6 feet away, but give somebody a smile and say, hey, I like your shoes, or hey, thanks for cleaning something. And support local businesses. Yeah,
wave at them from afar. Yes, and support local businesses. Absolutely.
Okay, Jaclyn, what's yours?
So my perk of the week is my dad. So my dad has listened to every one of our episodes the day it comes out. If it's going to be like a couple of hours before he can listen to it, he'll let me know, like, hey, I haven't listened yet, but I'm going to, like, the day of. And so after he listens to it, he'll text me and like tell me his thoughts about the case and, what he thinks about our opinions about the case. And then he's been giving us suggestions of cases that we should do. So he's just like super invested and supportive, and I so appreciate it. And I don't need to get into much of my dad's life story, but he has overcome so many challenges, and I'm just so proud of him. And about 6 months ago, he had a pretty massive heart attack, and he was on a ventilator for over a week, and we really did not think that he was going to make it, and he has just had this miraculous recovery, and he is just doing so well. And so I just love him, and I'm proud of him, and I appreciate all of the support that he is giving us for this podcast and how excited he is about it. And yeah, so I love you, Dad.
I was literally texting you the other day being like, your dad's glow up is like goals. Like, it's incredible.
Yes.
So, hey, Bill, love you. Thanks for the support.
So yeah, I think that's all we got for you guys today.
It was a lot. I'm sorry, but hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully your quarantine's going well. So go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.